Hey guys, it's James here from Sweet Science of Fighting. Today I've got something a little different for you in the way of video. Instead of me just in front of the camera talking, I thought I would demonstrate some aerobic conditioning exercise specifically for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I'm very wary of saying something is the best. Obviously, the best conditioning exercise for whatever martial art comes down to the individual, the phase of training, the time they have available and everything else. But in some cases, there are exercises and modalities that are better than others. And this is one of them that I believe is better, especially when we're talking about just pure cardiac output or low intensity, steady state cardio. Now, this is a combination of contralateral exercise circuits with jiu-jitsu drills essentially. And with these exercises, all I'm doing is doing essentially a lower body exercise, usually a single leg, and then pressing or pulling with the opposite arm, making it contralateral instead of the same side. With this as well, this is going to be paired with jiu-jitsu techniques. So the reason why doing jiu-jitsu style drills for conditioning instead of things like running, cycling, and swimming is because of what Soviet sports scientist Yuri Verkhoshansky states, and that is that aerobic work must stimulate the muscles in the same way as competition exercise because the anaerobic threshold reflects the aerobic potential of the muscles involved in the work. Meaning that what we do in our conditioning needs to be able to translate over to our competition exercise, and it must be very similar to our competition exercise for us to see that transfer in conditioning. Now, obviously these contralateral dumbbell circuits would not be considered specific to jiu-jitsu, but it's just nice to get some other variety movements in there as well. So not everything has to be specific to the sport, but that just means that you should prioritize more specific movements over non-specific movements, and you should see better transfer. Now, with our jiu-jitsu drills here, all I'm doing is just a fall back and then a technical stand-up, and now just doing some solo double legs. And the best thing about this stuff is you can do it by yourself. Now I'm just demonstrating this essentially just using a yoga mat on the grass. If you have actual mats or you have a room with mats, garage gym, or you're at your jiu-jitsu gym, you obviously have a bit more room to play with, and you can do a few different drills such as shrimping, even sit-throughs and things like that. So I'm going to put this routine down in the description and you can follow it yourself. I'm going to give a couple of different options. One is if you're got a setup like me here where you're kind of limited to what you can do, and then another one where if you have a lot of mats where you can do a few more things like shrimping and you have the space to do that. Now the idea is that you want to keep your heart rate anywhere between say 120 to 150 beats per minute. That's kind of our low intensity, steady state cardio parameters. And the reason we want to keep our heart rate into that low end range is we want to target these low intensity cardio adaptations. Now, we don't get to target these adaptations when we're doing hard rolling or we're doing hard high intensity interval training. We're going to target different adaptations doing those. So when we're doing our low intensity work, we're essentially looking to expand the heart chamber. And by doing that, we can pull more blood into the heart between each heartbeat. Essentially, this results in being able to pump more blood per heartbeat, and that means more oxygen and more nutrients to the working muscles while you're training. Now, this isn't the only adaptation that occurs when we're doing this type of training. We're also building more blood vessels in the working muscles, which means we can now use that oxygen to help with recovery between efforts and while we're training. So essentially, we're training the central or the heart adaptations, but also training the muscular adaptations so we can deliver more oxygen and we can use more oxygen. And this is how we can build our aerobic energy system. Now, if you want more of a breakdown on conditioning specifically for jiu-jitsu, in the description I've got an article down there specifically breaking down all the conditioning aspects for jiu-jitsu. And then I've also got in my program the underground grappling conditioning system that covers everything in detail there too. So if you can check both those links in the description, and you can get a little more insight. Now here I'm just taking a little break. My heart rate got a little high. I'm going to throw my heart rate data on the screen here. I was going to try to do it live, but The heart rate monitor seemed to crap out a few times while I was doing this. That was a bit of a pain, but you can see in the heart rate data, my heart rate is quite high during this. I'm not exactly fully in shape, especially being in lockdown for the past 7 weeks. But to give you an idea, if you do get your heart rate too high, you can just take a break and slow your pace down. The idea is to try find a pace that you can keep your heart rate in this 120 to 150 beats per minute range. Now, the only issue is when you're doing your jiu-jitsu techniques, you want to do them fast and generally explosive because that's how you're going to do them on the mats too. So it's just finding that balance between doing both. If you are targeting more anaerobic lactic adaptations, then some of these exercises are actually perfect for it. So your sprawls or your sprawl to technical stand up and things like that can get your heart rate very, very high, very, very quickly. So if you're targeting anaerobic lactic parameters, then this is one way you can do that too. Even cardiac power parameters where you're trying to get your heart rate as high as possible for a certain period of time. Now, as I mentioned earlier with specific and non-specific conditioning exercise, now you can do some running, some biking, some swimming and things like that. If you're doing a lot of jiu-jitsu, for example, you're training maybe 6 days a week and some of them are twice a day sessions for jiu-jitsu, doing jiu-jitsu specific conditioning is probably not needed because you're doing a lot of it on the mats already. You're rolling a lot, doing a lot of live drills, positional sparring, and probably a lot of drilling in that low intensity, steady state heart rate range. So for that, if you want to do a little extra, and even in that instance, you probably don't even need to do much extra conditioning. But if you did, then you can do some non-specific training because that's going to give you a little bit of variety and to break the monotony of jiu-jitsu training or being on the mat. So doing something a little different can be good there. If you're only training jiu-jitsu, say 3, 4, 5 times a week, then I think it's important to do your extra conditioning as specific to the sport as possible. One, you get to drill the skills themselves. So even though you might be feeling a little tired or fatigued during the conditioning, you're still drilling the correct technique to be able to do a good technical stand-up or a double leg and things like that. It also allows you to visualize. So if you're doing solo double legs, you can visualize your setups. You know, if you're gonna touch their head to fake for a snap down, or you're gonna arm drag into your double leg, you can do these things and visualize it to help bring that transfer back to the mat as well. So you have a lot of options. You're not just limited to the few exercises that I'm doing in this video. And if you have a partner, then you've got even more options. With a partner, you can do different things like pummeling. You can pummel for essentially a minute or 2 minutes, but just slow and steady, move around, use your hooks to manipulate the body. Doing things like that can really get your heart rate going. It's a really good conditioning modality, especially for your stand-up game. And then with your partner as well, you've also got the ability to just drill any technique, and you can do one for one like you do in class already, but you're going to do that as a conditioning modality. So you're not, instead of doing say 5 minutes, then standing around where you get shown a new technique, or 5 minutes and you grab a drink, you can literally do 20, 30 minutes of just non-stop one-to-one drilling. You could potentially pick 4 or 5 or even 6 different techniques that you want to cover, and then you can drill those, say 5 minutes each, 1-to-1 or 2-to-2. And that way you're essentially improving the skills of your jiu-jitsu while getting the conditioning effect. So don't let creativity stifle you. Just make sure that as long as you perform it in an easy, steady state manner, that anything can basically be done as conditioning. So if you enjoyed this format of video, please let me know in the comments below. I can make more like this with different exercise and conditioning and strength modalities for jiu-jitsu and other martial arts. Also, please check out the links in the description. They're going to give you a little more background into this and more than I can give you in just a video. And I've written plenty of posts on conditioning itself and specifically for jiu-jitsu as well. So please give this video a like and a subscribe. Also, you can check out my Tabata video, which is going to be up on the screen now. And that's going to show you exactly why a lot of high intensity training isn't going to help your jiu-jitsu conditioning like doing a lot of training like this will.